Hey folks, Party Moses here. Today we're going to do a brief tutorial about how to handle cavalry in battles in Grand Tactician Civil War. So before we get started with this one, just a couple of notes here on the deployment phase, or the pre-battle screen. Just want to show you a couple of things here. So this is a persistent campaign. This is a campaign that I'm running mostly to give opportunities to do these little brief tutorials. So it's a little bit different than my normal campaigns, but you can see here we've already fought a battle with Grant's Expeditionary Command, and I've got units here with low morale. So this is something that you should pay attention to, and I've got a single brigade with 228 men, which means it's an artillery brigade or artillery battalion, who are going to start the battle with low morale. And I'll show you what that means when we get into it, but generally when you see this little broken heart next to your men, your army in your deployment phase, you should really hover over it and you should see how many men you have with low morale, because if you have quite a few, that might be a good reason for you to attempt to either defend or withdraw from the battle entirely. And a couple of those options are down here, right? So we've got this whole little panel. So fight the battle, play the battle means we're going to go in command, which is what we're going to do. We can try to auto-resolve the battle, and because of the huge mismatch that I have between Polk here and Grant, I've got 16,000 men, he's got 7,500, I've got almost 10,000 more men than he does. Auto-resolve would probably do the trick. I can deploy to defend, which means that I'm in contact with Polk's command, but I'm refusing to actually engage. That means that if Polk wants to fight, he has to attack me. And this is something you might want to do if you want to wait for reinforcements in one time or another, or you can withdraw. You can break contact and withdraw, in an orderly fashion. You'll probably you won't go too far, or you can retreat entirely. That will hurt your morale for the army, because they don't like retreating. And this is, again, fairly common throughout the actual Civil War. But of course, we're going to go in and we're going to play the battle, but I just wanted to show you a couple of these little features here. So we're going to go and play the battle. I'm going to deploy, and I'll see you after the jump. Okay, folks, so here we are. We've got our tiny little deployment phase here. We are attacking the enemy, and their victory point is right here along the Murfreesboro Pike. So first things first, I need to find where the enemy are deployed, and I need to deal with that. So a couple of guesses first. So again, we want to look at where their deployment zones are, right? They don't have this one here at Salem, and they don't have this one down here, which means that their map control is probably limited to about this circle here. So I very seriously doubt I'll meet them with any entrenchments or anything past this ford here, this river, Stones River. I'm very unlikely to see them in Stones River, but I want to go look first, because I don't want to just expect that they're going to deploy a line here, march all my troops there, and then get cut up in detail as my troops are marching. I don't want to do that. That's why I've got my scouting division here. So first things first, when I click go, I'm going to have my cavalry come along down the railroad and deploy about here, just to see if there's anything I should worry about ahead of time. And then I'm going to bring my infantry and my artillery up to start thinking about my deployment. So again, before we get started, let's take a look at the order of battle here. So I've got McLaren here with with a division of infantry, 3 brigades. I've got Cooper with 3 brigades of cavalry, and I've got McCall with 3 brigades or battalions of artillery. And we can, again, zoom in closer to the artillery here, and we can see that it's the 1st Tennessee Light 6-pounders that have unstable morale. I'm not really sure why. The last battle we fought with this army was quite successful, and none of my men took altogether too many casualties, so I'm a little uncertain about why there's unstable morale. It might be that this battalion doesn't like Lieutenant Colonel George McGinnis, so I'll check that after the battle, and I'll have that on the recording as well, just to check and see. But I've got my 2nd Division here of all cavalry, and now, again, in my order of battle, I have all of my cavalry all together in a single division. And the reason I do that is because I'm going to use this whole division to scout, and I'm going to want to be able to give individual orders to my cavalry brigades that get responded to very quickly. And if I had, let's say, my 2nd Illinois Cavalry attached to my infantry, it'd be great to attach to my infantry for reasons I'll probably get into a little bit later. But that would mean that I would have to in order not to give orders to my cavalry, I'd either have to detach them, as we've done before, which will give them a morale hit, or I'll have to sort of make sure I'm sending orders to my cavalry and then giving individual brigade orders to my division of infantry here, and it's just sort of sluggish. It's not something that's really altogether going to make your men suffer or anything like that. It's just something that it's extra things that you need to click, which can be kind of annoying. In any case, I'm going to move my scout division just up there. I just want to come to the tree line to see what I can see first. Again, I want to be really careful because I don't want to run into any enemy entrenchments that I'm unprepared for first. So before I even start moving any of my infantry or my artillery especially, I want to make sure that I know where the enemy are. So let's speed time up and let's go find them. All right, nothing to be worried about yet. I'm going to detach some scouts first to see what I can see, just to double check again. And again, the scouts just give extra vision to the brigade that they're attached to. And unfortunately, at this state of the game, they used to be in an older patch, you could actually order that scout detachment around. But as you can see, they don't listen. It's a bug that I think that the developers just have not fixed. So what I tend to do is just use them statically. I'll deploy them as I get to a place where my cavalry are. I'll just deploy them to get the vision bonus, and then I'll take a look and redeploy them and get them back into their parent brigade, because it makes just kind of a cluttered mess if you don't do that. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to order them not to use roads, because I don't want them to stick to the roads as they go. I want them to go cross lots as they're advancing, just so that they can... I'm not worried about moving them up or down roads or the speed of their advance. I mostly just want them to look at stuff. So you don't really need them to move by roads that way. All right, let's speed it up again. I can also start moving my infantry up, since I know that at least up to here, they'll be safe. And I'm not going to order them to go cross lots. I want them just to go. Do the same for my artillery. So I'm not sure why they're not using the railroad, but whatever. So if I were to take a guess at this point, I would say they're either going to be deployed around here, or they're going to be deployed somewhere behind, just like really close, but behind their victory point. That's where I'm guessing they are, but I'm not going to rush my men forward because, again, I don't want to be caught out if I'm wrong. Okay, we have located the enemy. So they're actually being really assertive right up here on the line, right by these bridges. So I would be extremely foolish to try to attack this front on, so I'm not going to do that. But I have located them. I have found them, and now I just need to maneuver the rest of my men. So I'm going to order my cavalry to get a bit of a closer look. Just want to see as much detail as possible. Order Hamilton across the bridge there. And I'm going to send Wool across the bridge too. In the meantime, I'm also going to get my artillery over here, because I'm going to want them to deploy again against the flank of this position. It's a very strong position, so of course I want to weaken it as much as possible by attacking its flank. And again, the reason I can sort of think about this and do this is because I'm using my scouts so particularly. I want to find the enemy first. I don't want to blunder into them. I want to make sure I know exactly where they are first things first. And I can see that this line kind of extends all the way over here, right? They've got about 7,500 men, something like that. So it's mostly going to be, I think it's mostly these positions. It's these 3 brigades of infantry and this single battery, the single battalion of artillery. This actually might put my cavalry into a bit of trouble. So as soon as I can, I'm actually going to get them to back up a little bit or to go into the trees for cover. Actually, yeah, I'm going to get them to go into the trees there. You generally don't want your cavalry to be attacked by artillery. They'll cause quite a few casualties that way. But again, the trees will obscure their line of fire, and I'm actually probably going to use my cavalry to assault these guns pretty early. All right, my infantry are deploying. I'm going to get my 1st Division to actually countermarch and deploy back around this ford. Let's speed things up. These must be howitzers or something, or they might just be in a position where they have absolutely no vision or range because they're not firing at my cavalry, and they ought to be at this point. Oh, there they go. All right, who's under fire? It is John Wool. John Wool's going to deploy in the woods, so I'm not too worried about it. And Hamilton, of course, already in the woods there. And I'm going to get a massive pile up over here unless I stop my infantry, which I'm going to do. And, of course, they stop in the fucking worst spot. This is a extremely frustrating part of the game, to be honest. I don't like it at all. I really wish that there was a better way to deal with these pile-ups. Because they will happen no matter what, no matter how you try to avoid them, they will happen. I'm also not sure how this artillery is hitting my men. My artillery always just have a flat line of no engagement past trees, and the AI seems to be able to shoot through trees whenever they want. So that's a little bit frustrating. But it happens. It's a game. Get some scouts out. Get the vision bonuses. Nope. Cancel that. Some scouts out. All right, and now I can take McLaren's 1st Division, and I can bring them across the bridge. Now that my guns are ready. So my guns are going to be practically useless in this battle. I'm not going to have much chance to deploy them. I could deploy them here and try to have them do counter battery fire, but they're going against an entrenched gun, and I'm going to take more losses than I would inflict, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Hamilton's scouts back in. And if you notice, if you look at my division of cavalry, each of my cavalry brigades has a different arm, has a different weapon. So Carlos Buell here has the Springfield Musketoon. And of course, like always, we can take a look at what its strengths and weaknesses are. 69 caliber smoothbore cavalry carbine, 250 yard range, 2.5 rounds a minute. It's a decent cavalry arm. It's something relatively standard, and it's just fine. If you've got them, you should give them to people rather than mixed cavalry weapons, which are Garbo. So the mixed cavalry weapons over here, again, 3 rounds a minute. They're a little bit faster. They hit a little harder than the musketoons, like they have a larger caliber projectile, but they're not actually all that good. So the biggest difference between the mixed cavalry weapons and the Springfield musketoons, the musketoons actually have a slightly longer range. They fire at 250 yards rather than 200 yards, like the mixed cavalry cavalry weapons. And the musketoons actually do more damage. They do a 1.1 damage if you look at the game's manual. They do 1.1 damage if you look at the game manual, whereas the mixed cavalry muskets just do 1 damage, which is pretty much the standard. The Maynard carbines, on the other hand, they have a much longer range, the 300-yard range. They have a 12 round a minute rate of fire, which is faster than almost anything else in the game. And little Maynard carbines are actually like really interesting weapons, and I'll put a link to a video of somebody actually firing a Maynard carbine down below. A couple of channels, if you're really interested in Civil War weaponry and everything, there's a couple of channels you should probably follow, which I think are pretty neat. So I'll put a link down there for you. In any case, the Maynard carbine is a really interesting little carbine. You definitely should use them if you have them available, and you should put them in the hands of cavalry you're going to be using very assertively, like we're about to. one of the problems that this game doesn't do super well with, it doesn't try to model really hard, but one of the things that was very common in the use of carbines or kind of rapid firing weapons in the 1860s is actually the fact that these are black powder weapons. Black powder is exceptionally foul. It's something that's very, very, very dirty, and it leads to a lot of clog and buildup. Think of it sort of like hot, wet paint, like a thin layer of hot, wet paint. Every single time you discharge a weapon in a black powder weapon, it will create this sort of layer of paint, basically, of fouling, they call it. And as soon as that dries, it hardens a lot like paint. So if you imagine like taking your AR-15 to the range, and every single time you fire a single round, you get a tiny thin coat of black paint building up in the works of your gun, and then try to fire 60 rounds with that, you can start to see some of the problems. So the Maynard carbine is a breech loader. So you lock open the barrel and load from the rear every time. So it doesn't super have a lot of trouble with that. But one of the things this game does model quite well is that your men firing rapidly will go through their ammunition a lot faster. And in this game, if they have 0 ammunition, it just says low, and it reduces their rate of fire quite a lot. So it doesn't actually mean you cannot or can no longer fire. It just means that you're going to be firing at a much less rapid rate than you would before. So it's something to pay attention to. And if you were to give your entire army Sharps or Henry rifles or something like that, it's really great for that initial rate of fire. But unless you knock out the enemies really quickly using the tactics that you have to use, even if you had smoothbore mixed muskets, you're still going to have to pay attention to a lot of that. And you might run out of ammo, and you might be caught in the back foot that way. So something to pay attention to. It'd be really great if the game actually modeled the stress of firing rapidly with black powder, but it doesn't, and it doesn't really matter all that much. The Maynard carbines are pretty cool though, and if you like using the little rapid fire tactics like I'm about to show you here, they're a fine choice to make. So you can see the artillery here is firing at my Indiana cavalry, which is no good. So I'm going to try to do what I can to pull the aggro off of them a little bit. And I'm going to take my 1st division, my infantry, and deploy them over here. I mostly want them to be a target. And I want my 3rd division, if I can click on it. I'm going to actually take them out of march columns and into single line. And I'm going to bring them over here as well as soon as I can. But what I'm going to be doing with Hamilton, you'll see in a moment, is I want to take these guns. Now, these are cavalry, and I could probably charge them. And I'm going to bring my Kentucky cavalry forward to do just that in a moment. But I want to show you sort of how some of the, I guess, advanced features of using cavalry works. Because cavalry can actually be quite a potent force when they're dismounted. They can ride up really close to when they get in range of an enemy, dismount, and they can fire with rapidity and accuracy and do quite a lot of damage to the enemy dismounted. So I'm going to show you that. But first, I'm going to get them to ride up pretty aggressively, and I'm going to order them to charge. So they're going to go up really quickly. I'm also going to tell them to double time. And as soon as I get that order, they're going to start moving. Let's advance time a little bit here too. Here comes the courier. All right, once they're there, I'm going to order them to dismount. That's down here under the cavalry. And I'm going to order them, just like infantry, to advance. So they will start firing at anything in front of them as they advance, and you can already see the enemy are reacting to my moves here. So I'm going to get the 1st division to start coming up to support, and I'm going to leave my Kentucky cavalry here in the woods. And I'm going to dismount them and move them to the tree line to deal with this infantry as it comes up. Let's speed time up a little bit. See if I can get my infantry would, if my cavalry would stop just shuffling around like this, this can be very frustrating sometimes. All right, there they go. They go. They fired 2 rounds. Already dealt 10 casualties to this battery. And I expect they'll make fairly short work of this battery here, but can't be sure. Now I'm going to leave Buell on this side of the river, mostly for vision, and I'm going to use Wool and Hamilton as my main sort of fighting units of cavalry here. Let's advance time a little bit, and it looks like they're being passive with their infantry, which is great for me because I don't actually want to fight their cavalry or their infantry right now. So another thing we can do, especially because we're under artillery fire and we're taking some pretty serious losses, and I can expect them to take more, is put them in loose order. And what loose order does is it makes them spread out, makes them harder to hit, but it also makes their formation a lot looser and a little bit harder to control. Let's take a look at their morale. Under artillery fire, minus 15%. And that's going to go down over time. They're also fighting against an enemy in cover, so they've got a net minus 4% sort of morale hit in this engagement. But they've already inflicted 100 casualties against this battery, and they've driven it away. Perfect. So I'm going to get them to advance up. You can see how much wider the formation is as I've done that. And I want them to engage the enemy infantry while my infantry come up to support. So we got George Thomas coming up here. I don't know why these guys have not moved, but they ought to be moving. See if they actually go. And I think after this battle, I'm going to take another look, as you sort of frequently have to do in this game, unfortunately, and verify the game files. Okay, so bringing these guys up again. And between this brigade of infantry here and this, and my troop, my brigade of cavalry, I should be able to do some pretty good work against this. Also going to use the Kentucky cavalry to demonstrate some other features that might not be so obvious at first. So let's take a look at the morale of George Thomas over here. So he's in a fairly close engagement with Elzey's brigade. He's doing okay, hasn't taken too many casualties, is in a pretty good position, and we can look again down at his situation. He's supported near his commander, and he's got friendly cavalry close. So if we look a little bit more, the friendly cavalry doesn't actually show up on the own cavalry close, plus 5%, which is pretty great. Plus 5% boost, sometimes that'll counteract things like being under artillery fire or being outnumbered or being flanked, and it'll prevent some of your men from loss of cohesion or retreat because of morale penalties. So having your cavalry nearby is a net gain for every infantry unit that happens to be close, which is really a really great bonus, and it's another sort of element you can use cavalry for. They're also really great for speedily moving along the flank, which is what I'm going to do over here with Buell. I'm going to get Buell to just come just to the edge of the spring of the river here and start putting some fire on these men. You can see that Thomas has actually, because he has initiative on, increased the range of his engagement. So he's firing at all 3 of these enemy brigades here. And once again, I'm going to order my cavalry to close range. Speed this up a little bit. We can see we're giving them the unit outflanked debuff. And they're in a really bad spot. They're also getting a debuff because my cavalry, their enemy cavalry, is close by. So, you know, even having cavalry nearby, even having them like close to the flanks of the enemy is going to debuff them quite a bit. But I'm going to order these guys to mount. And of course, I'm going to leave Buell mounted as well, because these guys are going to start breaking pretty soon. And once they do, I'm going to want to follow that up by mounting my cavalry and riding them down. So I'm going to order Buell. Again, you hold Alt when the cross swords icon comes up. That's when you can give them orders to chase down the enemy. Bring them here. I'm also going to mount Hamilton here. And I'm going to order Hamilton to charge Elzey's brigade. So they're already wavering. They've got a lot of debuffs. And I should be able to rout them as well. Now, it's not a guarantee. This is not great terrain for a cavalry charge, certainly. But I want to see if I can rout them. And again, this is always a risk. You don't want to try to rely on cavalry charges against infantry, because it generally just will not work. But what we can do is charge them down, like I'm doing over here with Buell. Buell is going to charge into the Harper's brigade. Now, they've taken very few casualties, but we'll see as I chase them down, they'll inflict about 50 more apiece each time. So, I have also routed Elzey's brigade. My charge has broken them completely. So now I'm going to charge them down. And what I want to do is take prisoners. I'm going to try to take prisoners even though these guys are basically like, waterbending around this river here. And, that's fine. It's just something you got to deal with. But if they end up getting into weird terrain, you can try to get multiple units to charge at a single brigade. The more units you have charging a single brigade, the more likely you're going to inflict enough casualties that they're going to surrender. Which would be super great if they do. I doubt they will. It's been something that was nerfed pretty extremely in recent patches. You used to be able to take these pretty consistently, but it hasn't been working out quite so well since. Part of it is like, there's like a hitbox detection thing with the charging units, and it's a whole thing. So we'll see. And we have not actually inflicted any more casualties against them. And you can see, again, this is bugged. So, like I was trying to say earlier, what I'm going to do after this battle is go and verify my game files, because whenever you start seeing more weird things like this happening, like your cavalry not inflicting casualties on like chases like this, or you're getting into, you can hear melee, but you're also not inflicting any more casualties, that's a sign that you should verify your game files and see that you're not missing any really important ones. All right, well, we're getting some. All right, we've inflicted some casualties here, and we've taken some casualties from Elzey's brigade. They're up to 1,800. I doubt we're going to capture them, though, unfortunately. All right, speed things along. So, perfect. We also have our Kentucky cavalry here. Have inflicted enough casualties that now they get a perk. So let's talk a little bit about cavalry perks while I pause here and get us away from that sound of marching. So, we get a perk. So, as we've seen in this very, very brief, let's consider this kind of an introduction to the use of cavalry in Grand Tactician. We've seen that cavalry are most useful in initial scouting and then working the flanks against the enemy. You generally don't want them to be your kind of main line of defense. That's what you want infantry for. But there are a couple of things that we can use them for. So we've got three things, right? Scouting. We've got chasing down the enemy and inflicting casualties to take prisoners. And we've also got dismounted fighting, like infantry. Depending on what you want to do with your scouts, the one thing I'd say is right now, do not take expert scouts. It's bugged for some reason. It says you level up by scouting, and I don't think that means scouting on the campaign map. I think it means scouting on the battle map. But you can run around the entire map over and over and over again with your scouts deployed, and it will not tick up. You won't gain any more levels with that. So I wouldn't do this unless you're really interested in using the concealment bonus that you get, the plus 10% concealment bonus. But until they patch this, until they make this actually work better, I wouldn't take this one at all. We've got Cold Steel. Cold Steel is pretty good. especially if you're going to be using them for chasing down fleeing units and inflicting prisoner casualties. That's pretty great. It's also better for trying to break enemy brigades if they're wavering. But again, even if you have the Cold Steel leveled up to like level 3 perk, definitely don't try to use them to break fresh or, morale, well-controlled, fresh, morale strong units. Cavalry charging infantry almost never works, so I wouldn't try it too much. Mounted rifles is pretty good. This basically means that they'll stay mounted and they'll fire. You get a reload slowdown if you're fighting from horseback, just because it's awkward. It's more awkward to reload weapons on a horse than it is to reload them when you're standing on the ground. So you get a you can reload faster on horseback, and you can fire mounted a little bit more effectively. That's a pretty good one. I tend to take Stormers. Stormers allows you to use your men like skirmishers, which is really great for a couple of more specific things that we haven't really talked about quite a lot yet. But Stormers is a really good one, and you level this up by fighting in loose order. So pretty much every time you dismount, you should put your men in loose order if you have Stormers, and you should fight that way, and it'll level it up pretty quickly. And this is a really good one. This is especially if you're using your cavalry sort of like dragoons, sort of like mounted infantry. This is a really great one to take. There's also Vanguard. You could use these guys to fight detached, right? So like we've talked about, detaching them from infantry brigades or infantry divisions. So I would take Vanguard only if you tend in your order of battle to put cavalry in your brigade, in your divisions, alongside either artillery or infantry. If you have them in individual divisions like this, like they are sort of air-gapped away from the rest of your army, they fight together as cavalry, I wouldn't take Vanguard, because you're never going to use them detached. There's no reason to use them detached, so you're not going to level this one up. And the last one, of course, Lightning Brigade. This one's okay. Again, this is something, if you use them more as dragoons, if you use them as mounted infantry, Lightning Brigade is a pretty good one. So it allows them to move you can use cover. You get more advantage from cover if you use this one. And if you're expecting to use these guys kind of to protect artillery, or if you use them to fight as kind of your main line, Lightning Brigade's a pretty good one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Stormers for the 1st Kentucky Cavalry. And because they've got a great perk, I'm going to make sure that after this battle, I'm going to see if I can give them better weapons. But let's move this along. Again, I'd be very surprised. Hey, there we go. I think I've actually annihilated one of their brigades. It didn't show that they were whipped out, but that's too bad. But whatever. Right now we're just kind of running the clock down. Okay, here we go. So let's inspect the battlefield real quick and take a look at the number of casualties our cavalry have inflicted. So they are my entire 2nd Division, and they've inflicted 4,000 casualties. 3,700 of them are prisoners. That's mostly just from running the enemy down. So this is something to, if you are against the idea of using kind of cheese tactics, right? Like running them down, inflicting all these casualties, then you don't have to. You don't have to use that. But it's something I find is a little bit, it'll help to push a lot of victories into major victories if you can hit them hard. And I think the game as it stands is funky enough with some of this stuff that I don't think it's necessarily too overpowered. And it's a good way to get your cavalry to level up in experience. So it's up to you. But I tend to try to go for taking as many prisoners as I possibly can. So, again, I wanted to take a look at the morale of my army here, and it doesn't actually show any of my brigades are unhappy anymore. So I don't think that whatever that morale debuff was for that unit of artillery, it had anything to do with their leaders, which is good. But let's double check here. Nope. Oh, I see exactly why. So these guys are from Tennessee. Tennessee has 30 state support. So they're always going to start with severely reduced morale because they are from Tennessee, and Tennessee has extremely low state support in this army. Now, I'm fighting in Tennessee, which hopefully, if I kick this army out and I can take the rest of it, if I can restore the front lines, that means capturing these 3 forts, capturing Knoxville, and taking the Appalachian Valley and some of the other towns down here, the state support should start going up. So I might show this a little bit later if I kind of stick with this campaign as my tutorial kind of basis. We'll see. For now, I want to move Grant down here to Pulaski just to get some eyes on where that enemy army went. Okay, and there's Polk's command right there. You can keep an eye on them that way. But that is that for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. It wasn't a perfect little encapsulation of using cavalry, but I think it was a fairly good one. So once again, if you have any questions, if you want to know a little bit more, if you have any kind of specific problems that you're having in your campaigns or with handling your men on the battle map or whatever, feel free to reach out to me, leave a comment here on the YouTube channel, or get a hold of me on Reddit, and I'll be happy to take a look at it for you. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.